The Savoy Hotel in London was the kind of establishment where even the doormen looked like they belonged in a period drama. All marble columns and crystal chandeliers, with staff who could identify your social class from 50 paces. My cousin Charlotte had chosen it specifically for her wedding to Lord Sebastian Hartley, a minor aristocrat whose family tree had more branches than accomplishments, but whose title made him desirable in Charlotte's social climbing world. I stood in the hotel's ornate lobby, watching guests arrive in their designer outfits and inherited jewelry. Women in fascinator hats that cost more than monthly rent. Men in morning suits with pocket squares that had probably been ironed by someone else. This was Charlotte's dream wedding. A chance to cement her place among Britain's upper class after years of carefully curated networking. Penelope. You actually came. My Aunt Victoria appeared, dripping in pearls that may or may not have been real. Her eyes scanned me from head to toe, taking in my simple navy dress and lack of elaborate accessories. Oh. You wore that. It's appropriate for a formal wedding. It's appropriate for a job interview, darling. She sighed dramatically. Well, you're here now. Though I'm not entirely sure where Charlotte planned to seat you. The arrangements are very specific. We have 3 members of Parliament attending and Sebastian's godfather is an earl. My cousin Charlotte herself materialized, resplendent in a Vera Wang gown that had probably required a second mortgage. Her 4 bridesmaids flanked her like a designer-clad honor guard, all of them regarding me with expressions ranging from pity to amusement. Penny. Oh God, you're actually here. Charlotte glanced at her wedding coordinator, a severe woman named Georgina who carried a tablet like it contained nuclear launch codes. Georgina, where did we put my cousin? Georgina consulted her tablet with a slight frown. We didn't have space at the family tables, so we placed her in section C, behind the kitchen doors with the overflow seating. Perfect, Charlotte said brightly. That works, doesn't it, Penny? You've always been more comfortable in simpler settings. One of her bridesmaids, Philippa I think, giggled. Service staff section is more your level anyway. You can network with the caterers about your little government job. They swept away toward the ceremony room, leaving me standing with Georgina, who at least had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. Section C is just through those doors, she said quietly, pointing toward a corridor that clearly led to the service areas. I apologize for the placement, but the bride was very specific about the seating hierarchy. The ceremony was beautiful, I'd give Charlotte that. The Savoy's river room had been transformed into something from a fairy tale, with white roses climbing up columns and enough candles to constitute a fire hazard. I watched from my seat in section C, literally behind a decorative screen that separated the real guests from those of us who didn't quite make the cut. From my vantage point I could see the backs of heads and hear the vows, but I was invisible to everyone who mattered. My phone buzzed during the recessional. 8 missed calls from the Foreign Office. 12 text messages from my private secretary. All marked urgent with red exclamation points. My stomach dropped. I'd specifically arranged my schedule to avoid conflicts this weekend. The reception at Buckingham Palace wasn't until next week. The trade delegation from Singapore had been postponed. Everything had been carefully coordinated so I could attend Charlotte's wedding without international incidents interfering. I slipped out during the cocktail hour and called back immediately. Ambassador Winters here. Ambassador, thank God. My private secretary, James Chin, sounded frantic. The royal visit to the Singapore Trade Summit has been moved up. Instead of next week, they're incorporating it into today's schedule. The Princess Royal is already en route to the Savoy. I froze, standing in the corridor outside section C. The Savoy? Why would she? She saw your location on the security briefing and realized you were attending a family wedding at the same venue. She specifically requested to meet with you about the Singapore protocols before the official visit. She wants to understand the cultural sensitivities you've been negotiating. James, I'm at my cousin's wedding reception. The seating chart is finalized. Where is the Princess Royal supposed to? She's requested to join your table. Security is conducting a sweep of the venue now. She'll arrive in approximately 20 minutes with her security detail. I looked back through the doorway at section C behind the kitchen doors, where my single place setting sat isolated at a table meant for overflow guests and vendors taking their breaks. The table where my family had placed me because I wasn't important enough for the actual reception. Understood. I'll coordinate with hotel security. I found Georgina frantically directing staff as they set up the reception room. When I approached and explained the situation, her face went through several interesting color changes. The Princess Royal? Here. At this wedding. She pulled up her tablet with shaking hands. Where is she supposed to sit? We don't have room at the head table. The seating arrangements have been carefully calibrated for weeks. She's requested to sit with me. In Section C. Georgina stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Section C? Behind the kitchen doors. We can't seat the Princess Royal in the service staff section. She specifically asked to sit with me. My table will work perfectly. But who are you? Charlotte never mentioned. Understanding began to dawn in her eyes. Wait, what exactly do you do for the government? I'm the British ambassador to Singapore. I've been negotiating the trade agreement and cultural exchange program that the royal family is visiting to inaugurate next week. The Princess Royal needs to be briefed on the protocols before the official visit. Georgina's tablet nearly slipped from her hands. The reception hall had been set up with military precision. The head table sat on a raised dais, surrounded by tables for MPs, aristocrats, and Charlotte's carefully curated guest list. Section C, my section, was literally separated by a decorative screen and positioned near the service corridor where staff came and went with food. I watched my family find their seats at the prestigious tables. My mother sat at table 4 with various aunts and uncles, all of them dressed in their finest, already networking with Sebastian's relatives. Charlotte and Sebastian held court at the head table, accepting congratulations and posing for photographs that would undoubtedly flood social media within the hour. Nobody came to Section C. Nobody even looked behind the decorative screen. Then I heard the commotion in the lobby. Royal protection officers entered first, their presence immediately noticeable despite their attempts at discretion. Hotel security coordinated with them, checking sight lines and exits. Guests began whispering, phones emerging from pockets and purses as people tried to understand what was happening. Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, entered the Savoy with the quiet authority of someone who'd been attending formal events since birth. She was dressed elegantly but not ostentatiously, a far cry from the elaborate designer creations Charlotte's guests were sporting. Her security detail fanned out efficiently, and she spoke briefly with the hotel manager before her eyes scanned the reception room. She spotted me immediately, standing near the entrance to Section C, and smiled with genuine warmth. Ambassador Winters. There you are. I apologize for the disruption, but the Singapore visit timeline has changed dramatically, and I need your expertise before I leave tomorrow. The entire reception hall had gone silent. Conversations died mid-sentence. Champagne glasses paused halfway to lips. Every single person turned to stare as the Princess Royal walked directly past the head table, past the MPs and aristocrats and carefully seated social climbers, straight toward me and the service staff section behind the kitchen doors. Charlotte's face had gone from bridal glow to mortified pale in approximately 3 seconds. Your Royal Highness, of course. I gestured toward Section C. My table is ready, though I apologize for the location. It's a bit removed from the main reception. Nonsense. I prefer quieter spaces for working discussions anyway. Princess Anne glanced around at the elaborate decorations, the ostentatious displays of wealth, with an expression I couldn't quite read. Though I am surprised they've seated you here. Don't they know you're Britain's chief diplomatic representative in Southeast Asia? My family isn't entirely clear on what I do, Your Royal Highness. The invisible woman problem. I'm familiar. She looked directly at Charlotte, who stood frozen at the head table. You must be the bride. Congratulations on your wedding. I'm Anne. Your cousin has been instrumental in negotiating one of Britain's most important trade relationships in recent years. The economic framework she's designed will benefit British businesses for decades. Charlotte's mouth opened but no sound emerged. Princess Anne continued, her voice carrying that natural authority that came from a lifetime of public service. Ambassador Winters has spent 18 months navigating complex cultural protocols and economic negotiations with 7 Southeast Asian nations. The trade agreement she secured will generate billions in revenue and strengthen Britain's position in the Asia-Pacific region. I'm here because there's literally no one else who understands these relationships well enough to brief me properly. He turned back to me. Now, shall we discuss the Singapore protocols? I need to understand the gift-giving customs and the proper way to address the various ministers who'll be present. We sat down at my isolated table behind the decorative screen, the Princess Royal in the service staff section where my family had decided I belonged. Her security detail quietly repositioned around Section C, and suddenly the overflow area near the kitchen became the most secure location in the entire Savoy. I pulled up my briefing documents on my tablet while Princess Anne's private secretary joined us, taking notes. The reception continued around us in stunned chaos, but behind our decorative screen, we conducted actual diplomatic work. The Minister of Trade has specific preferences about meeting protocols, I explained. He appreciates directness but requires formal acknowledgement of hierarchy. I've prepared a cultural briefing that outlines the key sensitivities. From beyond the screen, I could hear frantic whispered conversations. The reception had essentially frozen, everyone too shocked by the royal presence to continue with normal wedding activities. The MPs my cousin had been so excited to host were staring at Section C like it had suddenly become Buckingham Palace. Georgina appeared, wringing her hands. Your Royal Highness, I apologize profusely for the seating situation. If you'll allow us just a few minutes, we can rearrange the head table to make proper accommodation. That won't be necessary, Princess Anne said without looking up from the briefing materials. Ambassador Winters and I are working. We don't need the distraction of being on display. Georgina retreated and I caught a glimpse of my mother's face through the screen. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. My Aunt Victoria was frantically Googling something on her phone, probably my name and title. Your family really didn't know? Princess Anne asked quietly, momentarily pausing our work. They knew I worked for the Foreign Office. They assumed it was administrative work or event planning. Event planning. She shook her head. You've negotiated treaties that will shape Britain's economic future, and they thought you planned conferences. Something like that, Your Royal Highness. We worked through the Singapore protocols for 40 minutes. Princess Anne asked insightful questions about cultural nuances, gift-giving customs, and the political dynamics between various ministers. She took the briefing seriously, understanding that diplomatic success often depended on respecting these precise details. When we finished, she stood and addressed the entire reception hall, her voice cutting through the nervous chatter. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for interrupting this celebration. I want to thank Charlotte and Sebastian for their hospitality, even though my arrival was entirely unexpected. She looked directly at Charlotte. I also want to take a moment to recognize Ambassador Penelope Winters, who many of you know as family but may not know as one of Britain's most accomplished diplomats. The room was absolutely silent. Penelope has served Her Majesty's government with distinction for 7 years. She negotiated the landmark trade agreement with Singapore that will benefit British businesses across 12 industries. She's currently coordinating diplomatic relations with 7 Southeast Asian nations simultaneously. Last year, she mediated a dispute between 2 trading partners that could have cost Britain billions, and she resolved it in 48 hours. Princess Anne's gaze swept across the family tables. When I learned Ambassador Winters was attending her cousin's wedding, I specifically requested to meet with her because there's no one else in the Foreign Office with her expertise. She's essential to Britain's diplomatic success in Asia. She turned to my mother, who had tears streaming down her carefully made-up face. So when you see that isolated table behind the screen, the service staff section where Penelope was seated, remember that you placed one of Britain's most valuable diplomatic assets with the overflow seating. That should tell you something about whether you truly understood the person you were dismissing. The Princess Royal placed her hand on my shoulder. Enjoy the rest of the reception, Ambassador Winters. I'll see you at Buckingham Palace next week for the Singapore delegation's official visit. And do bring your family. I think they should see you in your actual environment. She left with her security detail, leaving behind a reception hall of stunned guests and one mortified bride whose perfect wedding had just been exposed as the event where her family publicly humiliated someone far more important than anyone realized. The silence lasted maybe 5 seconds before absolute chaos erupted. Suddenly everyone wanted to talk to me. The family members who'd ignored me, Charlotte's friends who'd mocked my little government job, even the MPs who'd been too important to acknowledge my existence. Sebastian's godfather, the Earl, tried to engage me in conversation about trade policy. Aunt Victoria attempted to explain that she'd always been proud really. I excused myself and found Charlotte in the corridor outside, mascara running, her perfect bridal makeup destroyed by tears. Penny, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know you were an ambassador. You never said. I did say, Charlotte. Multiple times. At every family gathering, every holiday dinner. But you were too busy networking with aristocrats and pursuing your social climbing to listen to anything I actually accomplished. I put you with the service staff. Her voice broke. The Princess Royal sat in the service staff section because of me. She did. And honestly, that table behind the screen became more important than your entire head table combined. I met her eyes. I'm going to leave now. Congratulations on your marriage. I hope Sebastian's title brings you the fulfillment you're looking for. I changed in the hotel bathroom, trading my navy dress for the professional suit I always kept in my car. By the time I reached the Foreign Office, there were already 17 messages from family members. Apologies from my mother. Questions from relatives about government positions. Even Charlotte's bridesmaids were trying to connect on LinkedIn. I silenced my phone and walked into my office where actual important work waited, preparing additional briefing materials for the Princess Royal's Singapore visit, coordinating with 7 different embassies, managing relationships that affected millions of people and billions in trade. The service staff section behind the kitchen doors had been my family's statement about my worth. The Princess Royal's presence there was the universe's response. I didn't need their validation. I had the respect of the royal family, the trust of the Foreign Office, and the knowledge that my work shaped Britain's future. I'd proven my worth to the people who actually mattered. And that was enough.